Hi, this is Jonathan Rosenherz, a Jerusalem psychotherapist. This week's Torah and Psychology post, Vayishlach, is going to discuss a challenging topic for parents and for children, because we're going to discuss the transition into the teenage years. And this is something which, as we said, both for parents and for the teenager, brings out a lot of questions. A lot of questions of how to understand what's going on, how to approach this period of time. This transition, which takes a number of years, is a gradual process of puberty and the transition into teenage and adulthood. And if we look at this week's parsha, we get a hint towards this idea of what it means to be a teenager, this transition of being the age of, let's say, 13. According to many research now, there's an understanding that it begins earlier than this. But in terms of the process and the way that we understand from a halachic point of view of becoming an adult, that is obviously at 13 for a boy and 12 for a girl. And we see in this week's parsha that we have the event with Shimon and Levi, in that they take revenge on Shechem for the way that they treated their sister Dinah. And we are told that they went and they killed all the adult males in Shechem. And the Pasuk refers to, when it's describing what Shimon and Levi did, it refers to them as that they took their sword, and it uses the word ish meaning man. And Mefarshim explained that this is actually a source to understand that when a person becomes a man, they are 13 years old, because we understand that Shimon and Levi were 13 years old, and they are referred to as ish, as being a man. But interestingly, that this source of understanding that 13 is a time when people become a man is actually taken out of this event, which was in some respects, we can say it was a massacre. That they were actually, Yaakov rebuked them, not necessarily at the time, but when he was giving the brachas to all his children before he passed away, he made a point of saying how their actions was in a sense, it was violent, it was over the top, it was perhaps impetuous, and this is the source that we see for this transition of being a 13-year-old. And it certainly is indicative, it represents the turmoil and the changes and in a way the characteristics of being a teenager. That they wanted to act in a certain way and they had the right intentions perhaps, and the way it was expressed was an extreme expression of anger perhaps, of just a sense of distress, which came out in a violent act. It was a massacre. It was an act which was a zealous act, but was seen as being inappropriate. It didn't have the right shikul, the right judgment that a person perhaps should have been in this situation of how to deal with Shechem and how to respond. They acted in violence. And this was what Yaakov was saying, it was an inappropriate response. Which is, again, we understand in the teenage years, the changes, the hormones, the changes that are going on at this time, it actually is, you could say, an opposite example of how teenagers respond and how they judge situations. That in this, Shimon and Levi wanted to respond in the right way. They thought it was the right thing, perhaps, what they were doing, but they only viewed the situation in a very narrow, single way of perhaps it was a response which was extreme and violent. And therefore we could say that we understand this teenage years, it's very difficult because of all the changes and the lack of judgment actually during these years. But sometimes actions can be inappropriate, sometimes it can be extreme. And the process of going through teenage years is to work up towards an ability to actually regulate and to be able to understand all the changes that the teenager goes through as they come into adulthood, to have a more balanced view of themselves, of their body, of the way that they think about things, about the world, and therefore their actions won't be expressed in this extreme violent way perhaps. And it's also, furthermore, it's interesting, I want to just take another significant event from this week's Parsha, which is of course the fight, another violent sort of interaction, a fight between Yaakov and the Malach of Esau. And we know that they fought throughout the night, and finally he was struck at the side, in the sinew, in the Gid HaNasher, that the Mefarshim explained that the reason why the Malach struck him over there, the Zohar explains further that that the Malach could not overcome Yaakov, that the only place that he could strike him was actually the Gidon Asher, is the source in the body of sexual pleasure, of desires. And the idea that the Zohar brings out is that Yaakov was so clear and understanding and had a strong value and a strong sense of a stance in life that he just could not be defeated, the purity and the clarity in his life. But the Malach understood that when the idea of sexuality and sexual pleasure is the only area perhaps where it causes such a significant and powerful and intense level of confusion, where actually a person can be so persuaded, in a sense, swayed by their desires, that they stop having such a clear sense of judgment. And that's why the Malach struck him there, in order to try to overcome Yaakov, to, in a sense, bring down his power of judgment and control, and strike him in a place which creates confusion and creates passion and creates a sense of insecurity and instability. And this, again, if we make a link between what we're saying about the idea of teenage, the period of time of transition, in terms of obviously the physical changes in the body, the hormonal changes in the body, and in particular the confusion that can arise in the teenage years, in terms of a young boy and a young girl understanding their own identity, certainly their own beginning of sexual thoughts and desires, and understanding the differences in their sexuality and what it means to be an adult male and to be an adult female. This is a very, very challenging time, and certainly it's the prerogative and the duty of parents to help their young child, even before 13. It's important to start before this time. Each child needs to be judged, each situation, each child in their own way, and according to their own level of maturity, and according to their own situation. The parent has to understand how and when to talk to the child, and that they shouldn't be in any way ambiguous. They should try to explain to the child the transitions that they're going through, the natural changes that their body is going through, the emotions and the thoughts that they have, the way that they may be more impulsive in their actions. They might have lack of judgment, and certainly in terms of sexuality and the changes. It is important that a child hears this information from a reliable and responsible source, which most times is a parent. And a parent might feel uncomfortable doing this. It might feel awkward, but they should try as best as possible to explain in a clear, Torah-based way, using and understanding the concepts that we have from halacha and from hashkafa and from the sensitivity of Lashon HaKodesh and the halachic concepts, to explain to a child the special, unique qualities of a marriage, of a relationship between a husband and wife, to try to dispel any insecurity and any confusion around this. Because this is the teenage years. This is when a person becomes an ish. They have a lack of judgment. There's an impulsive response and actions, and they don't necessarily have the ability to process things in their own way, in a logical, sensible way, and they can be very much influenced by what happens in their environment. This is what we see in terms of the combination of what happened with Shimon and Levi and the way that the Malach tried to overcome and defeat Yaakov. This is the challenge of the teenage years, both for the child and for the parents. And hopefully, with the right guidance, this period of time can be passed through as smoothly as possible and in a successful and in a healthy way for the future of the child and for the successful relationship as well between parent and child. Have a great Shabbos and keep on.